The midday heat pressed Toronto to the ground with a heavy blanket. Detective Kennard Mbrotu walked slowly down the hospital corridor, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. The air-conditioned air didn't save him from the stuffiness he'd brought in from the street. The smell of antiseptics and suffering only added to his discomfort. A young nurse met him in front of room number 134. "The patient is conscious, but it hurts to speak," she warned him. "Please don't tire him out." Mbrotu nodded and entered the room. The man on the bed was a pitiful sight. The right eye was completely hidden by swelling. The left eye looked wary from beneath a half-lidded eyelid. The arms lying on top of the blanket were covered with bruises and abrasions. But worst of all was the face, swollen, with a split eyebrow and lips swollen beyond recognition. "Minus Mr. Sable? I'm Detective Kennard Mbrotu of the Toronto Police Department." The man tried to rise but immediately grimaced in pain and leaned back against the pillow. "The doctor said you have 2 broken ribs, multiple contusions, concussion." Mbrotu pulled a chair closer to the bed. "You're lucky a passerby called an ambulance. A little more and you could have bled to death." Darius Sable made a sound like a bitter laugh, but he coughed. "Tell me what happened." Mbrotu pulled out a notebook. Sable struggled with each word. His swollen lips struggled to move and his lower lip had a deep crack covered with blood. "I was coming out of a bar on Oak Street. It was about 2 in the morning. 3 guys dragged me into an alley. Can you describe them? Black, like me. One was tall, thin. One was shorter, stout. I couldn't see the third one. He was behind me. Did they say anything? They asked me if I knew Nikaya. When I said I didn't know who they were talking about, they started hitting me." Mbrotu took notes, watching the victim closely. Darius was clearly more nervous than he should have been in his position. "What happened next?" One of them pulled out a cell phone, showed a picture of the girl, asked if she was the girl I went out with last week. "And what did you say?" "At first, I denied it." Sable lowered his eyes. "But they kept hitting. I said I knew her. Then they stopped?" "Yes. But before they left, one of them said, 'Tell her Talcott knows.' Then they left." Mbrotu wrote down the name Talcott. It seemed familiar, but he could not remember where he had heard it. "And who was Nikaya?" Sable was clearly embarrassed, despite his injuries. "The girl from the escort service. Met her a couple times." "Full name? Contacts? Nikaya? I think it's Banham. The number on my cell phone, under the name Nikki B. The police seized your phone as evidence." "I know." Sable grimaced in pain. "Detective, I don't want any trouble. I was just, using a service, nothing illegal." "No one's accusing you, Mr. Sable, but assault is a serious offense, and I need to understand why it happened." Sable nodded, then closed his eyes, clearly tired from the conversation. "Thank you for the information. Get well." Mbrotu rose from his chair and headed for the exit. In the corridor, he took out his cell phone and called the station. "This is Mbrotu. I need Darius Sable's personal effects, particularly his cell phone, and run the name Talcott through the database. There may be a criminal history." The answer came faster than he expected. 30 minutes later, Mbrotu was sitting in his car, studying the information Talcott Diggs, 30 years old, serving a 4-year sentence for armed robbery in the county jail. Married to Nikaya Banham Diggs, 27 years old, Mbrotu opened Sable's cell phone and found a contact for Nikki B. The number matched the one listed in the police database as Nikaya Banham Diggs' contact number. The picture was starting to become clear, and it wasn't pretty. The inmate's wife works as an escort. The husband somehow finds out about it and sends friends to teach the client a lesson. A classic story that rarely ended well. Mbrotu dialed a number from Sable's phone. "Hello?" The female voice on the other end sounded wary. "Ms. Banham Diggs? This is Detective Kennard Mbrotu of the Toronto Police Department. I'm investigating the assault on Darius Sable. We need to talk." Pause. "I don't know any Darius Sable. I have reason to believe that you know him, and that the attack on him is connected to your husband, Talcott Diggs." The pause was longer this time. "All right," the woman finally answered. "Where and when?" They agreed to meet in an hour at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Mbrotu arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a table with a good view of the entrance. He wanted to observe the woman before the conversation began. Nakia Banham Diggs turned out to be nothing like he had imagined her to be. No flashy outfits or flashy makeup, just a plain t-shirt, jeans, hair gathered into a simple ponytail. She looked like a college student, not an escort. Mbrotu raised his hand, drawing her attention. The woman headed toward his table. "Detective Mbrotu?" She sat down across from him, holding a cup of coffee. "Minus Ms. Banham Diggs." He nodded. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Her movements were tense, her gaze wary. She looked around as if she was afraid of being followed. "I don't understand why the police want to talk to me," she said quietly. "It has to do with the attack on Darius Sable. He was brutally beaten last night. The attackers were interested in his connection to you." Nakia's face turned pale. The hands holding the cup trembled slightly. I don't understand." "I think you do understand," said Mbrotu softly. "Ms. Banham Diggs, I know you work for an escort service, and I know that you are married to Talcott Diggs, who is now in prison." Nakia closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her strength. "It's not against the law to work as an escort," she said at last. "You're right, but assaulting your client is a crime, and from the looks of it, it has something to do with your husband. Talcott couldn't have..." One of the attackers sent a message. "Talcott knows." Nakia's face froze in an expression of horror. "He couldn't have known," she whispered. "I was sure he wouldn't find out. I need to know more, Ms. Banham Diggs. About you, about your husband, about how you came to be in this situation." Nakia looked around as if checking to see if anyone was eavesdropping on their conversation. "Not here. Let's go to my place. I'll tell you everything there." Nakia's apartment was in an old building without an elevator on the 4th floor. Small, but clean and neat. Mbrotu noted the sparseness of the furnishings. Cheap furniture, worn carpet. On the walls hung several photographs. Nakia and a tall, well-built man with pronounced facial features. Talcott Diggs, apparently. They looked happy in the pictures, smiling at the camera, hugging each other. "We met 6 years ago," Nakia began, pointing to one of the photos. "I was just out of high school working as a cashier at a supermarket. Talcott was older, already in trouble with the law, but not serious. Petty theft, fights. He wanted to change, get a normal job. For me." She went into the kitchen, put the kettle on, and continued. "2 years ago, we got married. Things were going well. Talcott got a job in construction. I got a job in a beauty parlor. We dreamed of a house of our own, of children." Her voice trembled. Mbrotu waited silently for her to continue without interrupting. He knew that sometimes the best way to get information was to just let people talk. "Then last fall everything fell apart," Nakia returned with 2 cups of tea. "Talcott lost his job, started hanging out with old friends. I begged him not to do anything stupid, but..." She shook her head. "One night they robbed a gas station. With a gun. No one was hurt, but Talcott got caught and got 4 years. And you started working as an escort." Mbrotu finished for her, accepting the cup. Nakia nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I held on at first. The savings, the double shift at the salon, but then my mother got sick, and I had to send money home to Alabama. And I had to save up for Talcott's lawyer for the appeal. I didn't have enough money." "When did you start?" 3 months ago. It was hard at first, but then, I got used to it. The money was good. The work wasn't every day. I told Talcott I'd taken a job as a waitress in a nightclub." Mbrotu watched the woman carefully. Her story sounded sincere, but he sensed she was not telling him something. "When was the last time you saw your husband?" 2 weeks ago. We're allowed 1 visit a month. And you haven't noticed anything strange in his behavior?" Nakia hesitated, wrapping both hands around the cup as if seeking warmth. "No, though. He asked about my new job more than usual. Wanted to know exactly where the club was, who my co-workers were. Do you think he suspected something?" "I don't know. I don't think so. How could he have known?" Mbrotu didn't bother to answer that question. The prison's network of informants was more effective than any intelligence. If someone saw Nakia with a client and reported it to an acquaintance in prison, the news could reach Talcott in a matter of days. "Do you have any close friends? Someone who knows about your new job?" Nakia nodded reluctantly. Delano Tift. We've been friends since we were kids. She moved here from Alabama with me. She knows everything. I need to talk to her. Why? Nikaya's tense. Standard procedure. She may have noticed something that will help us understand how your husband knew about your work. Nikaya reluctantly gave her friend's contacts. As Mbrotu was about to leave, she suddenly grabbed his arm. Detective, do you think Talcott is really behind the attack on Darius? It's possible. Does he have connections on the outside? I don't know. He used to have a lot of friends, but after his arrest, most of them turned away. Who visits him in prison besides you? No one. At least that's what I thought. Mbrotu left his card. If you remember anything important or if you're threatened, call immediately. Delano Tift agreed to meet at the same cafe where Mbrotu talked to Nikaya. She was the complete opposite of her friend, bright, extravagant, with purple-dyed hair and lots of piercings. So you're a cop, she said, in lieu of a greeting, plopping into the chair across from the detective. Nikki said you were investigating an assault on one of her clients. That's right, Ms. Tift. Just Delano. She sipped her coffee from a large mug. Ask me anything you want. Just don't waste my time with questions like, do you know what your friend does? Of course I do. Do you approve of her choices? Delano snorted. What choice does she have? Talcott's in jail, no money, no education. What's she gonna do? Slave for a pittance in a diner? She's tried to be a good girl for too long already, if it wasn't for her mother. What about her mother? Cancer, terminal, treatment's expensive, no insurance. I see. What can you tell me about Talcott? Delano's face darkened. Nikki loves him. God knows why, but she does. He treated her well, it's true. Before he sat down, you think he might have found out about her new job? What do you think? Delano replied sarcastically. Everybody knows everything in prison, especially about their wives. Do you have any idea who might have told him? Delano pondered, tapping her bright red fingernails on the table. Maybe one of Nikki's clients. She'd said some guy had a big crush on her, started calling her, giving her gifts. She blew him off, but he kept stalking her. Name? I don't know. Nikki didn't say. Embroth made a note in his notebook. Tell me more about Nikki and Talcott's relationship. How did they meet? At a bar. Nikki had just come up from Alabama at the time, looking for work. Talcott came over, bought her a drink. He was handsome, confident. You know, for a backwoods girl, a guy like that is like a ticket to a new life. Did he tell her about his criminal record right away? No, of course not. She found out later when she fell in love. So she stayed with him, believed he'd change. And you know what the funny thing is? He did try. He got a job, dumped his old friends, even talked about getting married. What changed? Delano sighed. Money. It's always about money. Talcott lost his job, couldn't get a new one because of his criminal record, started drinking, and then he went back to his old habits. Did Nikaya ever say she was afraid of him? Eli, and she always claimed he never laid a hand on her. Not that I believe her. Why not? Saw bruises a couple times. She said she fell. Classic, isn't it? Mbrotu nodded. Classic indeed. The story is as old as the world. Love for the bad guy, belief in fixing him, then disappointment and fear. And a strange, inexplicable loyalty even after all that. Last question. Had Nikaya received any threats lately? Delano tensed, set her cup aside. Why do you ask? Standard procedure. No, there's more to it than that. She squinted. You know something. Mbrotu decided to be frank. Nikaya's client's attackers passed on a message from Talcott. If he found out about her work, she could be in danger. Delano turned pale despite the abundance of makeup on her face. Damn it. I thought it was just a coincidence. What was? Nikki got a letter a week ago. No return address. Inside was a note that said, I know everything. She thought it was from that intrusive client. Mbrotu pulled out his cell phone. I need to contact Nikaya immediately. But there was no answer. Delano tried calling too, to no avail. Shit! The detective cursed. Let's go to her place. 15 minutes later, they were standing in front of Nikaya's apartment door. Mbrotu knocked, but no one answered. Delano pulled out a key. I have a spare, just in case. The apartment was empty. There was no sign of a struggle, but there was an envelope on the kitchen table, open and empty. It's the same letter, Delano confirmed. But there's no note inside. Mbrotu examined the envelope. No fingerprints, no trace. The postmark was local, but that didn't tell us much. Do you think something happened to her? Delano asked worriedly. I don't know, but I intend to find out. In the car, Mbrotu's phone rang. It was a colleague from the station. Kennard, you asked about Talcott Diggs. I've got some interesting information. His cellmate, Ebony Azebo, was released 3 weeks ago, on parole. Address? Sent it to your phone. One more thing. Prison records show Diggs received 2 letters last week. No sender listed. Thank you. Mbrotu turned to Delano. Do you know a man named Ebony Azebo? Delano shook her head. I have never heard of him. Did Nikaya ever mention that her husband receives letters in prison? Nunuptu. Only that she writes to him herself. Mbrotu nodded, starting the car. I'll take you home, and then I'll visit this Azebo guy. But Delano suddenly grabbed his arm. Wait, I just got a text from Nikki. She's fine, she just turned her phone off because she got a call from that intrusive customer. What kind of client? Name? She won't say. But she says she's scared, and that she got another letter this morning. What's in the letter? Delano lowered her eyes to the phone screen. Photos. She's in them, with clients. And it said, Talcott expects an explanation. Mbrotu felt a chill run down his spine. Where is she now? At my house. She says she's afraid to be alone. Good. Let's go to your place. I need to see those photos. Delano's apartment was on the other side of town in a more affluent neighborhood. As Mbrotu expected, the furnishings inside were bright and extravagant. Lots of red, purple, unusual furniture and art. Nikaya sat on a couch with her arms wrapped around her knees. She looked exhausted and frightened. She flinched at the sight of Mbrotu, but then relaxed as she recognized him. Here, she held out an envelope to the detective. This came this morning. Mbrotu carefully extracted the contents. A few photos, obviously taken with a hidden camera. Nikaya entering the hotel with various men, getting into their cars, walking down the street alongside clients. Nothing explicit, but all quite compromising. Who could have done this? Nikaya asked in a trembling voice. I have a guess, replied Mbrotu. But first tell me, when is your next date with your husband? A week from today, Wednesday. Cancel it. I can't. Talcott will. It's a matter of your safety, Ms. Banham. Nikaya lowered her eyes. You don't understand. If I don't come, he'll know for sure that something is wrong. Mbrotu sighed. She was right. Then we will act quickly. I need to find Ebony Azebo and find out what links him to these threats. Nikaya raised her eyes full of fear at him. Do you think Talcott wants to hurt me? Mbrotu didn't bother to lie. I don't, but we'll find out. In the meantime, be careful. No customers, no meeting strangers. And report any strange phone calls or letters to me. As the detective was about to leave, his phone rang again. It was the duty officer from the precinct. Detective Mbrotu, you have a message from the county jail warden. They intercepted a strange letter addressed to Talcott Diggs. Inside were pictures of his wife with various men, and a note. She's lying to you. The county jail greeted Kennard Mbrotu with the smell of bleach and gloom. Gray corridors, iron doors, endless bars. After intercepting a letter addressed to Talcott Diggs, the detective decided to meet the prisoner in person. He's in the interrogation room, the warden said as he led Mbrotu down the corridor. Good kid, no problems with him. He keeps to himself, but he's among the authorities. Mbrotu nodded. That was consistent with the information he'd gathered on Diggs. Despite his relatively short sentence, Talcott had quickly gained respect in the prison hierarchy. Talcott Diggs sat at the table with his handcuffed hands resting on it. Tall, muscular, with sharp facial features and an attentive gaze, he seemed calm and relaxed. Nothing in his demeanor betrayed a man who could have orchestrated an attack. Minus Mr. Diggs, I'm Detective Kennard Mbrotu. Thank you for agreeing to talk. Talcott tilted his head slightly. There wasn't much of a choice. His voice was low and soft. What do you want to know, Detective? Mbrotu sat down across from him with his notebook in front of him. I'm investigating an assault on a man named Darius Sable. Does that name sound familiar to you? Talcott shook his head slowly. I've never heard it. And the name Ebony Azebo? A slight smile touched the prisoner's lips. A former cellmate of mine. He got out 3 weeks ago. You keep in touch with him? He came by a couple times for dates, like an old friend. Is that forbidden? No, Embroth made a note. Minus Mr. Diggs. Do you know what your wife is doing now? Talcott tensed a little, but his voice remained calm. She's working as a waitress in a nightclub. Why? Are you sure? Why should I doubt it? Mbrotu watched the prisoner's reaction carefully. Talcott remained calm, but something flickered in his eyes. Anxiety? Suspicion? Minus Mr. Diggs, we have information that someone of your acquaintance assaulted a client of the escort service where your wife works. Talcott didn't flinch, only leaned forward slightly. My wife doesn't work for an escort service, detective. This is some kind of mistake. One of the assailants relayed the message. Talcott knows. Diggs was visibly tense now. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw clenched. I know nothing about this attack, and I don't believe Nikaya is working as an escort. Someone is trying to pick a fight with us. Embroth decided to change tactics. Minus Mr. Diggs, when was the last time you saw your wife? 2 weeks ago. We date once a month. And everything was okay? Yeah. She was a little tired, but that's understandable. Double shifts, new job. Did she mention any problems? Financial difficulties? Talcott was quiet for a while. Money's always a problem when the husband's in prison, especially now that her mother is sick. But Nikaya is strong. She's coping. Have you gotten any letters lately? Besides letters from your wife? Talcott squinted slightly. Why do you ask? It's relevant to the investigation. No, I haven't received any letters except from Nikaya. Mbrotu knew that was a lie. Prison records confirmed the receipt of 2 letters from an unknown sender, and another had been intercepted. But he wouldn't expose Diggs for the lie he was. Thanks for talking to me, Mr. Diggs. If you remember anything that might help the investigation, let me know through the warden. Talcott nodded, his gaze cold. Detective, he called out to Mbrotu as he was about to leave. If my wife is really, if there's something wrong with her, I want to know. I'll pass your words on to her. As he left the interrogation room, Mbrotu asked the warden to arrange a meeting with the warden. He needed to find out how the correspondence and visitation control system worked. Gerald Wayne, the warden, was a stocky man with a military bearing and the tired eyes of a man who had seen too much. All incoming mail is screened, he explained when Mbrotu asked his question. But we have limited resources. We look for drugs, weapons, escape instructions. We don't read personal emails unless specifically instructed to do so. And visitors? ID checks, cursory searches, conversations in the visiting room are recorded, but no one listens in unless there's suspicion. Again, understaffed. Have you noticed anything unusual in Talcott Diggs's behavior lately? Wayne hesitated for a moment. I can't say. He's always been a quiet inmate. Keeps his dignity, stays out of trouble, but everybody knows everything in prison, detective. Rumors spread faster than the flu. If Diggs's wife really is an escort, sooner or later he's gonna find out. And then there's trouble. You think he's dangerous? All men are dangerous when it comes to their women, especially men like Diggs. Reputable, proud. I'd advise you to talk to Azebo. He and Diggs were close. Mbrotu thanked the warden and went in search of Ebony Azebo. The address he was given at the station was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, but locals told him that Azebo frequented the Blue Crocodile bar nearby. The bar turned out to be a filthy hole with a scratched-out counter and the smell of musty beer. Despite the daylight hours, it was dark and crowded inside. Mbrotu spotted Azebo immediately. A lean, wiry man with dreadlocks sat at a corner table, sipping a beer. Ebony Azebo? Mbrotu approached the table, showing his badge. Detective Kennard Mbrotu, I need to ask you some questions. Azebo leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowed. I haven't done anything, officer. I am clean. It's not about you. I'm interested in Talcott Diggs and his wife. Ah, Azebo relaxed. Have a seat, detective. You want a beer? No thanks. You were Diggs' cellmate? 8 months. Good guy, Talcott. Smart, calm, not like most of the idiots in there. You talked to each other since your release? I visited a couple times. I brought cigarettes, magazines, nothing forbidden. Azebo smirked. Do you know his wife? I've seen her in pictures. Pretty girl. Talcott loves her very much. Did you know she works as an escort? Azebo froze with his mug to his mouth, then slowly set it on the table. There were rumors, but I didn't believe it. Who was spreading those rumors? I have no idea. Prison is a big village, detective. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody talks about everybody. Somebody said they saw Diggs' wife with a rich guy in a fancy hotel. And Talcott knows about these rumors? If he does, it's not from me. Azebo held up his hands. I would never tell him such a thing. It would be not good. Why not? Talcott was obsessed with his wife. He talked about her every day, how she's waiting for him, how they'll start a new life after he's released. If he found out she was sleeping with others for money… Azebo shook his head. He wouldn't have survived it. Or she wouldn't have survived, Mbrotu said quietly. Azebo shrugged his shoulders. Talcott would never have touched Nikaya. He would rather kill himself. And what about the letters? Did Talcott receive letters from anyone other than his wife? Azebo averted his gaze. I don't know anything about that. Minus Mr. Azebo, if you're hiding something, I'm not hiding anything. He raised his voice, then looked away and continued quietly. Look, I just got out, on parole. I don't want any trouble. I can get you in trouble if I find out you had something to do with the attack on the escort service client. Azebo went pale. What assault? I don't know anything about any assault. Mbrotu watched the man's reaction carefully. It seemed Azebo really didn't know about what had happened to Sable, or was pretending very well. Very well, said the detective. If you think of anything useful about the letters, or who might have tipped Talcott off about his wife's work, give me a call. He put a business card on the table. After talking to Azebo, Mbrotu headed for the bank. He needed to find out more about Nikaya Banham Diggs's financial situation. With warrant in hand, he accessed her bank statements for the past 6 months. The picture was disappointing. Before she started working as an escort, Nikaya barely had enough money to pay her rent and utilities. Then came regular cash deposits, sometimes small amounts, sometimes substantial, and large transfers to Alabama, apparently to his mother. But what caught Embroth's attention was a payment to a women's health clinic 3 weeks ago. He called the clinic, introduced himself, and asked for information. As he suspected, Nikaya Banham Diggs had recently found out she was pregnant. The detective thought for a moment. The situation was getting more and more complicated. The pregnant wife of an inmate working as an escort, and the husband might be starting to suspect something. A recipe for tragedy. Mbrotu's phone rang. It was Nikaya. Detective, her voice trembled. I received another letter, with pictures and a note. What kind of pictures? Yeah, with clients. Nothing explicit, but, it's clear what we do. And a note. Talcott will know soon enough, unless you pay up. Extortion, Mbrotu frowned. How much are they asking? $5,000. I don't have that kind of money. Don't worry. Don't throw the letter away. I'll come over and take a look. There may be prints or other evidence. Half an hour later, Mbrotu was at Nikaya's apartment. She was sitting on the sofa with her arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to protect herself from an invisible threat. The letter lay on the table, untouched. I took it with tweezers, she explained. Just as you said before. Mbrotu put on gloves and carefully removed the contents of the envelope. The photographs were taken from a long distance, probably with a telephoto lens. Nikaya entering the hotel with a man, leaving the restaurant with another, getting into a car with a third. The note was printed on a regular printer. Talcott will know everything soon. If you don't want trouble, pay $5,000. Instructions follow. When did the letter arrive? This morning. I found it in the mailbox on my way out to the store. Did you see anyone suspicious around the house? Was someone following you? Nikaya shook her head. I don't know. Maybe. I've often had the feeling of being watched lately, but I thought it was paranoia. Mbrotu examined the envelope. There was no postmark, so the letter had been delivered personally. I'll send it to the lab. Maybe they can find some prints. What am I supposed to do? Nikaya sounded desperate. If Talcott finds out, have you thought of telling him the truth yourself? Nikaya looked at the detective as if he were suggesting she'd jump off a roof. You don't know Talcott. He's very proud and very jealous. He'll never forgive me for this. But if he already knows, or is about to find out, maybe it would be better if the truth came from you instead of the blackmailer. Nikaya bit her lip, pondering. Maybe you're right. We have a date in 3 days. I could... Wait, Mbrotu interrupted her. I'm not sure it's safe. Are the dates supervised? Yes, of course. There's a guard and cameras. But we have some privacy. We can talk quietly, hold hands. Still, I don't think it's worth the risk. We don't know how Talcott will react. I know my husband, Detective. He'll be furious, but he won't hurt me. At least not physically. Mbrotu wasn't so sure about that. The information he'd gathered on Talcott Diggs spoke of a man with strong self-control, but also with equally strong passions. And passion and jealousy are a dangerous combination. At the very least, let me arrange for extra security, just in case. Nikaya smiled weakly. If it makes you feel more comfortable. There's something else I wanted to talk about. Mbrotu decided a direct approach would be better. I know about your pregnancy. Nikaya froze, her eyes widening. How did you find out? It's my job, he said softly. Does Talcott know? No, she lowered her head. I found out 3 weeks ago. I wanted to wait until my next date to tell him myself. Are you sure the baby is his? Nikaya looked at the detective with a challenge. Yes, I work as an escort detective, but I don't sleep with clients without protection. This child is my husband's, from our last date 2 months ago. Mbrotu nodded. He had no reason not to believe her. Good. But you must realize that the blackmailer can use this information as well. He can tell Talcott that the child is not his. Nikaya turned pale. Oh my God, I hadn't thought of that. It's all the more important that you tell your husband the truth yourself, about the job and the baby. Nikaya was silent for a long moment, then nodded decisively. You're right, I'll tell him everything on the date. And whatever happens, Mbrotu wasn't sure that was the best solution, but he could see that Nikaya had already made up her mind. All he could do was to ensure her safety. I'll talk to the warden, arrange for extra security during your date. Thank you, Detective. Nikaya took his hand. I know what you think of me, escort, wife of a criminal, but I'm not a bad person. I'm just trying to survive. Mbrotu squeezed her hand in return. I'm not judging you, Ms. Banham. I just want everyone to be safe. As he walked away, Mbrotu felt like he was missing something important, something that didn't add up. Who was blackmailing Nikaya? Who had attacked her client? And did Talcott Diggs know the truth about his wife? The answers to these questions could cost someone their life. Wednesday morning was unexpectedly cool for July. Kennard Mbrotu stood at the window of his office, watching heavy clouds slowly creep across the sky, promising rain. A phone call snapped him out of his reverie. Detective, she refuses to cancel the date. Delano Tift's voice sounded worried. I've been trying all night to talk her out of it. It's no use. Mbrotu sighed. He himself had tried to persuade Nikaya not to see her husband until the situation was clearer, but the woman was adamant. Where is she now? At my place. She's getting ready. The date's at 11. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Try to hold her until I get there. Delano's apartment greeted Mbroda with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the sounds of a quiet argument from the bedroom. Nikaya looked pale but determined. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair gathered into a neat bun. No makeup, just a light lipstick on her lips. I won't change my mind, Detective, she said when she saw Mbrotu. I have to tell Talcott myself. It's the only way. The only way what? Mbroda asked. To get him to forgive you, or provoke him into doing something dangerous. You don't understand, Nikaya shook her head. If Talcott finds out from someone else, it will only make things worse. He must hear the truth from me. Mbrotu saw that it was impossible to change her mind. The guilt was too strong, the need for purification too great. All right, he said at last, but I will go with you, and I've already arranged with the warden for heavy security during your visit. Do you think Talcott could hurt me, in prison, with guards and cameras? I don't know, but I'd rather not take any chances. On the way to the prison, Nikaya remained silent, absorbed in her thoughts. Only once did she turn to Mbroth and ask, Have you ever loved so much that it hurt? Mbroth did not answer. His own love story had ended 2 years ago in divorce and bitterness. He didn't want to talk about it. The county jail towered above the surrounding landscape as a gray concrete hulk. Warden Gerald Wayne met them at the gate. Everything is ready, he told Mbroth. Visiting room number 3, Heavy camera surveillance, 2 guards at the door. Not the usual one? Mbrothu clarified. Yes, especially for this occasion. You can watch through the monitor in the next room. Nikaya looked slightly alarmed at all these preparations, but she did not back down from her decision. Before entering the visiting room, she took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders as if preparing for battle. Good luck, Mbrothu told her quietly. At the same time, in his cell, Talcott Diggs was reading the letter he had received that morning. The paper trembled in his hands, his face contorted with anger and pain. The photographs attached to the letter showed his wife with various men in unambiguous situations. And the note was short and brutal. She's pregnant, but the child is not yours. Talcott slowly folded the letter and hid it under the mattress. His face became stony, his eyes blank. When the guard came to escort him to his date, Diggs looked perfectly calm. The date room was small, with 1 table and 2 chairs. No partitions, just a CCTV camera in the corner under the ceiling. Nikaya was already waiting when Talcott was brought in. Her face lit up with a mixture of fear and love at the sight of her husband. Talcott? She stood up, holding out her hands. Diggs approached slowly, his gaze impenetrable. He didn't take her hands, just sat down across from her. You look well, he said quietly. In the next room, Mbrothu watched them through a monitor. 2 guards stood nearby, ready to intervene at the first sign of danger. But so far, everything seemed calm. How are you? Nikaya asked, trying to take her husband's hand. Talcott allowed her to do so, but his own hand remained lifeless. Fine, he replied. And you? How's your waitressing job going? There was a faint note of sarcasm in his voice that Nikaya didn't seem to notice. The job? That's what I wanted to talk about. She took a deep breath. Talcott, there's something I have to tell you. Something important. Diggs tilted his head slightly, his eyes scrutinizing his wife's every move. I'm listening. Yeah, I'm not a waitress, Nikaya began in a shaky voice. I had to find another job, more lucrative. What kind of job, Nikaya? Talcott asked, though his face showed he already knew the answer. I work at an escort service, she blurted out, her eyes downcast. I know it sounds awful, but I needed the money. For a lawyer for you, for my mom's medical. Talcott didn't interrupt, didn't show any emotion. He just sat there, looking at his wife while she spewed out all her excuses, her pain, her fear. I never wanted to deceive you, Nikaya continued, her eyes filling with tears. But I was afraid you wouldn't understand, that you'd hate me. And you think I won't hate you now? Talcott asked very calmly. I hope you can understand it was a forced measure, temporary, just to make ends meet while I sit here like an idiot, believing that my wife is faithful to me, Talcott finished for her, believing that we have a future. Nikaya reached across the table trying to touch his face. We have a future, Talcott. I love you. Only you. And that's why you sleep with other men for money? Yeah. She hesitated. It's hard to explain. I think it's very simple. Talcott pulled back, avoiding her touch. You betrayed me. Our marriage. Everything I believed in. In the next room, Mbrothu tensed. He could see Diggs's face changing, rage boiling behind the mask of calm. This is not going well, he told the guards. Stand by. Nikaya continued to speak, her voice growing more desperate. Talcott, listen to me. There's something else. Something important. I'm pregnant. For a moment, Diggs's face softened, something resembling hope in his eyes. But then he was impenetrable again. Pregnant, he repeated. And the baby is mine? Of course it is yours, Nikaya exclaimed. How can you ask? How can I not ask? Talcott's voice now sounded harsh. You're sleeping with other men. How do I know whose child it is? I've always used protection with clients. Always. This baby is from our last date, 2 months ago. You're lying. Talcott shook his head. You've been lying to me all this time. Why should I believe you now? Mbrothu saw the situation heating up. Talcott clenched and unclenched his fists, his shoulders tense. Be ready to go in, he said to the guards. But there's no apparent threat yet, one of them replied. We can't interrupt a date without a reason. In the visiting room, Nikaya cried. her words turning into an incoherent stream of apologies and promises. Talcott, on the other hand, was growing calmer outwardly, but Mbrotu knew it was a deceptive calm, like the calm before the storm. "I love you, Talcott," Nikaya said. "Everything I've done for us, for our future, for our child." "Don't you dare say our," Talcott hissed suddenly. "It's not my baby! It's the child of one of your clients!" "No!" Nikaya looked shocked. "How can you say that? I swear the child is yours!" "I was sent a letter," Talcott said, leaning across the table to her, "with pictures and information about your pregnancy. It said the baby wasn't mine." "That's a lie!" Nikaya grabbed his hands. "Someone's trying to break us up. The same person blackmailed me, demanded money, threatened to tell you everything." Talcott froze. "Who was it?" "I don't know." Nikaya shook her head. "Detective Mbrotu is investigating it. He thinks it might be connected to your former cellmate, Ebony Azebo." "Ebony?" Talcott looked surprised. "He's my friend. Why would he—" "I don't know," Nikaya repeated. "But someone is trying to destroy our family. Please, Talcott, believe me. I love you, only you, and this baby is yours." Mbrotu noticed the change in Diggs's gaze. For a moment, uncertainty flashed in it, as if he wanted to believe his wife. But then something clicked, and his eyes went cold again. "You betrayed me," he said quietly. "Everything I believed in was a lie." "No, Talcott, no." Nikaya walked around the table, knelt down in front of him. "I love you. I've always loved you. What I did, it was a mistake. I won't work there anymore. I'll find another job. We'll be together when you get out. We'll be a family." Talcott looked down at her, his face impenetrable. Then he slowly raised his hand and stroked her cheek. "Do you really love me?" he asked softly. "More than life," Nikaya whispered, snuggling into his hand. Suddenly, the expression on Talcott's face changed. His eyes flashed with such fury that Mbrotu instinctively lurched forward. "Come in!" he shouted to the guards. "Now!" But it was too late. Talcott grabbed Nikaya by the throat with both hands and squeezed so hard that the woman could not even scream. Her eyes widened with horror and incomprehension, her hands clawing helplessly at her husband's wrists. The guards burst into the room 3 seconds later. They dragged Talcott away from Nikaya, dropping him to the floor. But it was too late. Something crunched in the woman's throat as Diggs squeezed her neck with inhuman strength. She fell to the floor, wheezing and gasping. "Medic!" shouted one of the guards, trying to help Nikaya while the other held a hysterical Talcott. Mbrotu ran into the room, kneeling down beside Nikaya. Her face was already beginning to turn blue, her eyes rolling back. "Hold on," he told her. "The ambulance is on its way. Hold on." But Nikaya didn't hear him. Her body went limp. Her breathing stopped. When the paramedics arrived 5 minutes later, they could only pronounce her dead. Talcott was taken to the holding cell. He didn't resist, didn't say a word. His face was blank, his gaze absent. It was as if a part of himself had died with Nikaya. Mbrotu stood over the woman's body for a long time, trying to figure out how he could have prevented the tragedy. What had he missed? What signs had he missed? "It's not your fault, detective," said the warden, standing beside him. "No one could have foreseen it would explode so suddenly, without warning." "I should have insisted on canceling the date," replied Mbrotu. "I knew the situation was explosive. She wouldn't have listened, and you know it." Mbrotu sighed. Wayne was right. Nikaya was determined to talk to her husband, to tell him the truth. She believed their love was stronger than circumstances. She was wrong. Later, in the morgue, looking at Nikaya's pale face with finger-shaped bruises on her neck, Mbrotu thought about all the warning signs he had seen, but had not given them due importance. Of Talcott's reticence, of his obsession with his wife, of his restrained rage. She was pregnant, the pathologist said, covering the body with a sheet. "About 8 weeks." Mbrotu nodded. Another life cut short by a senseless outbreak of violence. The next day, he met with Delano Tift to give her the details of her friend's death. The woman was sobbing, face pressed into the palms of her hands. "I should have stopped her," she repeated. "I should have stopped her from going in there." "You couldn't have known," Mbrotu tried to comfort her. "No one could have foreseen that Talcott would explode so suddenly." "You don't understand." Delano raised her tearful eyes to him. "I knew he was dangerous. Nikki told me he once almost strangled a guy who was hitting on her in a bar. He's possessed. I should have remembered that. Mbrotu wrote it down in his notebook, another piece of the puzzle he had missed. Back at the station, he began to compile a report of the incident. All the evidence pointed to Talcott Diggs acting out of passion, provoked by his wife's confession. But Mbroth was troubled by the question of the mysterious letters. Who had sent them, and why? The answer came unexpectedly. In Talcott's cell, they found all 3 letters hidden under the mattress. Forensics found fingerprints on the envelopes. They belonged to Ebony Azebo. The interrogation of Diggs' former cellmate was short and productive. Azebo quickly broke under the pressure of the evidence. "I didn't want anyone to get hurt," he excused himself. "I just wanted money. Blackmailed her. Thought she'd pay so Talcott wouldn't find out." "But then you decided to tell him anyway," said Mbrotu. "No, I mean yes, but..." Azebo was confused. "I didn't think he would kill her. I swear he loved her. I thought he'd get angry, yell, maybe leave her, but he wouldn't." "Then why write to him about the baby? Why lie that the baby wasn't his?" Azebo lowered his eyes. "I wanted to hurt him. He was always better than me, smarter, stronger. Everyone respected him. Nobody paid attention to me, and he had a beautiful, faithful wife waiting for him. I had no one. I wanted him to feel what I felt, that he had nothing." Mbrotu shook his head. Petty jealousy, petty revenge, and 2 lives, Nikaya's and her unborn child's, cut short because of it. Ebony Azebo was arrested as an accessory to murder. Talcott Diggs was charged with first-degree murder. The evidence was abundant. The surveillance video clearly showed the moment of the attack. Testimony from security guards confirmed that Diggs acted deliberately and not in a fit of sudden rage. Reviewing the videotape for the 100th time, Mbrotu noticed the expression on Talcott's face moments before the attack. Not rage, not madness, cold determination. He knew what he was doing. He wanted Nikaya dead. A month later, Mbrotu stood in the cemetery, looking at Nikaya Banham Diggs' modest headstone. Delano stood beside him, holding a bouquet of white lilies. "She loved him," Delano said quietly. "Even after everything he did, she continued to love him. It is so unfair." Mbrotu was silent. In his work, he had often seen love turn into obsession, passion into violence. But the story of Nikaya and Talcott shook him particularly hard, perhaps because he saw in the woman's eyes the same blind faith he'd once seen in his ex-wife's eyes. "She deserved better," he finally said. Delano nodded, placed the flowers on the grave, and walked away. Mbrotu remained standing for a few more minutes, pondering that love is the most beautiful and the most dangerous feeling in the world, and that sometimes even cameras and guards can't protect us from those we love.